We're going to break down this video and look at some of the claims that Jake's making. You know, part of the goal of this channel is to expose this guy that he's a complete shill. And so one thing about Jake that we've talked about, that he's a narcissist, he's egocentric, it's all about him. We're going to talk about all the great things that he does. And we know that authentic truthers don't have to justify, they don't have to prove their salt. They do that through their work. And so Jake is always reminding his viewers, the demographics of his viewers must be pretty young, because you can see it's just nonsense. So we're going to have to suffer through this narrative. And what's interesting about him, you can see he's got really no facial expression. He's reading it like a script. There's no feeling. There's no emphasis. There's no connection to what he's saying. He's talking about something that never happened. This is just a script, and as he plods through this, you can see he carefully chooses his words and a strategy because he can't F it up.
The citizens for constitutional freedom seemed to have succumbed to an early demise. This is where we come in. On the day that Ammon first entered the wildlife refuge, I created a Facebook page called Citizens for Constitutional Freedom. As a longtime investigative journalist who has covered cases of government abuse for 15 years, my goal...
Okay, so he jumps right into, again, he's just boasting. There's nothing humble about this guy or righteous. And so, of course, he started this Facebook page, which would take 15 minutes to do, and he's just this patriot, right? But what we're going to find out, he's just a shill, he's just a fraud. So as far as his journalism, his investigative journalism career, we have no proof that this is the case. We've never seen his credentials as an investigative journalist. This is a dangerous job if you're actually effective. He claims to be investigating the deep state and Rothschild. But again, after 15 years, he can't cite one case that was ever adjudicated or one result of anything that he's done. So this is just a bunch of minutia. All he's doing is he's reminding you that he's real. And the more that he does that, the more fake he appears.
Was to provide up-to-the-minute news and information about the events happening in Oregon. The page received national attention. I was quoted in major publications such as the New York Times, Rolling Stone magazine, Oregon Public Broadcasting, the Washington Times, among others.
Okay, so I mean, it really gets redundant. We're going to hear this script over again and again about how he was given this platform. And again, if you're on this platform, as we now know, you're not authentic. These are not your credentials. He's basically telling us who he works for. So he's some kind of gatekeeper. I mean, the thing is that we've talked about his bio before. He doesn't actually have any achievements.
I'm the grandson of Ellen Morphonios, the famous hanging judge known internationally by her nickname Maximum Morphonios.
Well, let's correct him. He's not the grandson. He's actually the granddaughter of this man who is biologically his grandfather, not his grandmother. So we've already talked about this man. If you can't see that this is a man, there's nothing we can do to help you. Okay, this is a wig. God, look at these man eyes. It's not the eyes of a woman. You know, this square chin, thick neck. And don't forget, this judge is on the bench for 21 years, and there's some really nefarious activities going on the bench for these 21 years, and the judge under judicial canons would be required to report it. But what we're going to find is that this judge was actually involved in misconduct. And due to the national stage that the judge had, and probably affiliations with the Masons and other Luciferian groups, it looks like the judge cut a deal and retired during Operation Court Broom, and then showed up as a witness under immunity, which is always a sign that there was a deal cut.
For her harsh sentences on repeat violent offenders. Ellen hosted the radio show for Rush Limbaugh from time to time.
So we're going to take a look at the effects of estrogen on a man, but this is a man. And so now we've got the wig. The wig's gray, but this is clearly a man on estrogen. Probably drinking a lot too, by looking at the eyes. Probably a very stressful life, to have to dress up in a costume as a woman every day, and the second costume being the black robe. So this judge was defrauding everybody. Everybody that went in front of this judge thought it was a woman, but it actually was a man. So this is deep deception going on. This is really a mockery of the judicial system. This is what this judge is involved in.
She was a frequent expert legal panelist on CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC. But when the federal government, the FBI, tried to set my grandmother up by offering her a bribe, she...
So what he's talking about is, yes, there was an FBI sting, and the FBI created these fictional drug cases, put them in front of the court, and then they actually used this man to bribe them. And so a lot of the judges accepted the bribe. It looks like Morphonios would have known about this. There was one attempt to bribe Morphonios in May of 1991. By June, the investigation was cut down. And don't forget, as we'll discover in Operation Court Broom, Morphonios retires on the spot. Okay, steps down, takes immunity. So clearly this person is not the real thing.
They became vindictive and began harassing our family for a period of years. I learned from my teenage years to distrust the federal government.
So this is a bunch of baloney, and this is what's so really embarrassing intellectually and spiritually about this guy, because he's claiming the FBI harassed his family. There would be absolutely no reason that this would take place. I mean, clearly this court was completely corrupted. There's no doubt about that. But following around this man dressed as a woman just doesn't make any sense. And of course, he's using this again to give him some credence. And everything that he talks about is in the past. Okay, this is a guy he's reaching into the graveyard to authenticate himself. And so this is, again, a bunch of bullshit.
My grandfather was a Pulitzer-nominated investigative journalist who later became an influential political strategist.
So now he's talking about the grandfather. We don't know. He doesn't mention the name. I mean, let's just assume that grandfather is married to Judge Ellen Morphonios, who we know is a man. So grandfather would be just like Jake. This would be a female to male transgender. And again, who gives a shit what your grandparents did? I mean, it doesn't, to reach into the grave to authenticate yourself is just ridiculous. It's another big sign that this guy's a complete fraud.
As I grew into adulthood, I followed in my grandparents' footsteps. I've worked as a political campaign manager, a strategist for several state and federal candidates.
So we're not going to watch this video anymore. It's pretty offensive, because this is just the ego. This is just Jake talking about Jake, which he seems to do very, very well. Let's take a look at a couple of articles about Judge Morphonios. And so the thing is that we can see here that the judge was under an immunity order. And so here's a complete, utter asshole who was this outrageously harsh judge that is never held responsible for his corruption in the court, and who actually takes the easy way out and takes immunity. And the fact that he has immunity shows what a charlatan he is. So here's one of again, Judge Morphonios is on the bench. At this point, Morphonios had been on the bench. Well, Morphonios, at the date of this, is off the bench now. But Morphonios had been on the bench for 21 years. And so one of Morphonios' judicial colleagues testifies in this federal trial that he's under the influence he's addicted. He's an addict to alcohol, cocaine, prescription drugs, for clouding his judgment. So here's a guy that's taken bribes on drug cases who's claiming that he's an addict. This is how pathetic Morphonios is, and this Judge Davis. By the way, the jury ends up letting this guy off. This is how sickeningly easy the public is. We've got this quote, hanging judge. And Morphonios would have known that Judge Philip Davis was an addict. There's no way you can hide this. And so this is another violation of judicial canons. is this failure to report your colleagues. So again, there's collusion going on in the workplace where Morphonios is aware that all these lawyers and judges, including Morphonios, are involved in kickbacks on drug cases and who knows what else. Pretty embarrassing. So we've got this personality judge, talk radio personality. Anytime you're looking at somebody like this who's on the stage, they're always a fake. She was known to be outrageous, so she retired. So right here we can see that Morphonios retires during the investigation. So this is an admission of guilt, and Morphonios then becomes a witness under immunity, which again is another sign that Morphonios, again, after dishing out all these rather pathetic sentences and this whole national stage of being this tough judge, he is in fact a wussy who hides behind his judicial robes to get away with some pretty severe criminal activity. So, and what's interesting is we can see he was never charged, definitely investigated, and he returns to the bench in 95. All right, and so you would think that the average person, this guy's supposed to be really smart, right? But he's actually pretty stupid. He's an idiot. And so he returns after retirement, and again, he's involved in a situation involving an alleged bribe attempt that he doesn't report. And so he's kicked to the curb. She was a wonderful woman. She had a tough exterior. No shit. I mean, it's a man, for God's sakes. But was also very warm and soft outside of court. Well, I really doubt that very much. Morphonios survived by 2 sons, and we're not hearing Jake talk about the sons. So we can see that this judge made a mockery of the judicial system, was in fact a criminal himself on the bench, along with his gang of judges and lawyers that were taking kickbacks and involved in other activities. So that's Judge Morphonios.